So anyway, thank you all for taking the time to be out here. So this, as I said, January proposal, it will be in the January budget. We'll go from $330 million to $750 million. We built, I think, best-in-class framework for tax credits in this country last year. We codified that and expanded it for additional 5 years. But there are obviously a lot of people are interested in potentially looking at the criteria eligibility and looking to expand it, looking to build on it. And no one's ideological about that, at least in our administration. We're open argument, interested in evidence, what works best, and we'll work with the legislature through the legislative process. The good news is there's a lot of muscle memory as it relates to tax credits the last few years at the state level, and so I'm confident in the process. Final word, it's been acrimonious, been difficult. A lot of the folks you saw out there assembled, been at odds and been, some would say at each other's throats in some respects. And it's wonderful to see everybody together, united around a position and a proposal at a time when people, again, feel a lot of anxiety and feel so divided. So I think this also has a unifying appeal within the industry. And final word, it's not the last word. No one's naive that this is going to somehow solve for everything. I mean, you've seen the 5-year averages as it relates to scripted TV down 55%, down 48% as it relates to feature films, below average the last 5 years. We got a lot of work to do. And so I don't want to overpromise that this is, quote unquote, the only solution. Clearly, we have a lot of other ideas that need to be brought to bear.
We have a projection of the cost-benefit ratio of the tax credits versus what actually it might bring in the way of overall revenue, not only locally but to the state?
It's a question we ask all the time, frankly, across the spectrum. And it relates to R&D tax credits, it relates to all kinds of incentives. There's the tangible and intangible, and then there is just competing data that's collected. And that's what's so interesting at times for you, frustrating as a taxpayer in particular. I'll give you an example. LAECD put out a report, said for every dollar we invest, we generate $24.40 of economic output. And there's contradictory data that say it's only marginal benefit. And so one has to sort of look at all of those, I think, with some an open-mindedness, a little more objectivity. Some are going to push and assert the ROI being off the chart. But one thing is obvious to anyone, the industry here is increasingly on life support. And it needs a pattern interrupt. We need to jolt. And people looking to leave, the email box over the last few months has been next level, because I do think there was an expectation that things were going to turn around after some of the labor unrest, and it didn't materialize. And now people are sort of getting in despair, a little panic. And that's why I answer a question you haven't asked, why I wanted to do it now and announce it a few months before the January budget.
Do you think you have the votes to pass this?
Yeah, I do, because I say, where's the members of the legislature? You'll appreciate this. We had more people than I think even members of the legislature that wanted to co-sponsor the extension last year. There's a lot of enthusiasm in this space, because I think what it represents, again, back to pride, values, culture, expression, and freedom. And I think a lot of those things, there's sort of a dark cloud. I don't want to get into politics, but a lot of folks feeling that anxiety as it relates to potential darkness in 10 days, which we're going to do everything to make sure it doesn't happen. And what this industry represents as it relates to free expression, what it represents in terms of diversity and thought, and I think it will play well from perspective of getting those votes.
You mentioned the state is in a position to afford this now. How are you going to pay for this increase?
It's just part of the budget I'm putting together. We balanced not only the current fiscal year, as you may recall, I balanced for the next fiscal year with the legislature, so we provided a 2-year framework for a balanced budget. We've had some very good revenue news. Some of it has been made public. It's exactly what we had said. If you go back to my January and May budgets, the volatility and the dust settling as it relates to the capital gains looked like an EKG chart, 11.4%, 11.9% back, and now the normalization about 5% as it relates to capital gains as a percentage of personal income tax. And so it's allowed us to see in the future a little bit more, subject to any external massive recessions and the like. We were able to substantially hold our reserves last year as we balanced for the next 2 fiscal years. I'm looking at other priorities. I'm looking at areas where we want to continue to be more efficient and more effective. I don't want to pull back from that, but we can certainly provide the space for this incentive.
Some states have uncapped film tax credits, like Georgia, and in certain places outside the U.S., again, no caps. Will a bump to 750 really allow you to be in the same level with those places that have thrown, if you'll pardon the phrase, money at you?
Yeah, well, I'm going to let the mayor talk.
Let me just say a direct answer to that. If you look at some of those states that have no cap on it, there are also states that haven't made other investments like we have in education, in healthcare, in social services, in housing. And so I think the leadership that the governor has shown, recognizing that this as our foundational industry, I think for too long we took it for granted and assumed that the industry was always going to be here. And I think one of the things that we learned the first time around is that legislators think of Hollywood with the A-list actors and didn't really understand how in almost every legislative district the residents had a direct benefit, because people don't think so much about the ancillary businesses that are impacted. And I remember in those days we were concerned about production going to Toronto. We weren't thinking about Georgia or Louisiana or New York. And because we didn't intervene aggressively then, those places actually developed their own industry. But I just want to say to you, Governor, we don't see this as being all on your shoulders. We are going to help you do this in terms of getting the support from the cities and from other areas to make sure that you have the votes that this stays in the budget and is able to pass.
To his point, though, is there any thought, Governor, in changing so that you can compete with
well, look, I mean, this would, it's the right question. I mean, you look at some of these I mean, the UK, I mean, you've seen what's happened overseas in particular, and you'll continue to see that as people continue to compete from a global perspective. But look, you can control what we can control as it relates to our domestic realities. And we've got a state in New York that has been very formidable over the last decade or so. This would put us ahead of New York, and I think that sends a pretty powerful message. And Georgia has its own unique circumstances, own unique ecosystem, unquestionably. But you got to be careful here. You can get caught in, as the mayor said, into literally sort of a different kind of competition, and that's for limited funds in the healthcare space, in the education space, as she said, childcare space, space for seniors. I mean, these are all things that I'm deeply focused on right now as I'm looking to balance my budget. But look, it's more than doubling. Sends a statement. It's deeply meaningful. The last time we raised it was marginal, and people were very appreciative of that. And there was a lot of enthusiasm about this. This sends, I think, a pretty powerful message. And as the mayor said, it's not just top down in this respect. It's also bottom up. And I'll just amplify, as she led the state as speaker, I remember in 2006, coming down to L.A. saying, well, we wanted to take some of your production into San Francisco. And we created one of the first city tax credits. And I was a little frustrated with the state leadership, not with her leadership at the time as mayor, saying we were starting to lose productions. And so, that competition I'm mindful of within cities, within states, and you're right, notably now to start focusing more broadly on global. And that's where the federal government also can play a role. And I'll just tip a hat to an Angelino, who might be the next president of the United States. She may have a thing or two to say about that. Stay tuned.
Governor, how quickly could we see production ramp up once this is passed?
Well, I mean, I'll ask the film director of the film commission.
Oh, thank you so much. Today, extremely important day. The program that I administer through the California Film Commission, we have been oversubscribed for a long time. $330 million annual was not sufficient. Turning away qualified productions that meet our thresholds. We have a very unique, targeted tax credit program. It's about job creation and promoting economic spending. So we feel really good about that. What we'll be able to do with the increase is take in more projects. What does that mean? More film projects, feature film projects, independent, non-independent, TV shows. that will sustain jobs, create jobs, and promote economic activity here.
But I mean, the point I think Colleen's making, important point, is we literally were losing those productions. They were leaving. They would not have left had they had processed all the criteria and were eligible. So by doubling this, by definition, you're going to see the benefit.
And others never applied. Can you go back?
Are you counting on the infrastructure solidity here in Hollywood as being an advantage, and as much as not going to other states, saying, sure, you get the tax credits now, but we have the infrastructure to do everything here without having to outsource your production at various levels down the line? Is that going to give you, with that 750 million, a winning hand overall?
Well, but let me just say again, before, those other states didn't have infrastructure. A number of those other states do have infrastructure now, which really adds the pressure on us to make sure that we can bring the production back.
But at the end of the day, you look at all the assets, all the talent, you look at how many folks say, if you have a marginal decision and at least you're competing, even if it may be a little bit more expensive to do it here versus the incentives there, I think that's going to inure to our benefit because, as you suggest, that infrastructure, particularly as it relates to the lives that are literally impacted, and the families and the schools, not just the executives, but that workforce. So the mayor's right. I mean, obviously, you're seeing these ecosystems develop in other parts of the country, but no one comes close still to California.
Last question. Last question. You talked about New York, Governor, out there.
And that was the mayor. She was trashing New York. That's right. Yankee.
Yes.
No, someone thought that was an AI. I was almost. No, that wasn't easy. Come on.
Talk to us about the World Series, how you're feeling about it.
Look what I'm wearing. Look what I'm wearing.
Yeah, let's
for you. My gosh. Don't get me in any more trouble. I got a lot of grief up there with those Giants fans for that simple video. I'm not even kidding. Like, seriously. I'm not. You think I have trouble with some of the Trump folks. It's the Giants. I got to be careful here. I know that I got a big bet with Governor Hochul, so you absolutely better believe the Dodgers are going to win.
Oh,
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, yeah.